Okay, so let's dive in. It's this huge question, isn't it? Something millions of us think about. Where's the best place to actually live?
Hmm.
Are you someone who needs that, like, electric buzz of a big city, all the possibilities? Or is it more the quiet rhythm, the feeling of being rooted in a village?
It's a classic dilemma, and this deep dive, it's all based on the source material you shared with us, which really gets under the skin of those two very different ways of living.
Yeah, it does. So our mission here really is to unpack what your source material tells us. Look at the pros, the cons, hear some real stories from people.
And maybe even peek at what the future might hold, trying to figure out what actually counts when you're weighing up, city life versus village life.
Right. Let's maybe kick things off with the city. Your source material uses this great phrase it calls cities giant magnets, just pulling people towards them.
It does, and when you look at the advantages laid out in the source, you can really see why they have that pull.
So what's the biggest draw, according to the source?
Well, number one usually seems to be career opportunities. It's
Yeah.
pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Cities just have more jobs concentrated in one place, often higher salaries too, potentially. And, access to the big global companies, the headquarters,
Yeah,
stuff you just don't typically find in smaller towns or villages.
that's a massive factor, yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's something else, the source flags, just pure convenience.
Oh, definitely. Think about it. Supermarkets open all hours,
Yeah.
food delivery, like instantly available on your phone,
Right.
and often really good public transport systems, so maybe you don't even need a car, that sort of thing.
And the sheer volume of things to do. Your source talks about entertainment, culture.
Yeah, like cinemas, gigs, museums, festivals. The source really emphasizes just how much choice there is in a city. Always something different happening.
Plus, and this is crucial for a lot of people, access to key services.
Exactly. We're talking about the big hospitals, the top universities. If healthcare or education is really high on your list, cities usually offer the most options.
Okay, so that's a pretty compelling case for the city. But the source material doesn't just leave it there, does it? It shows the other side, too.
Not at all. That magnetic pull definitely comes with its own set of, well, challenges. It's not all bright lights.
No. And the first one everyone mentions, and your source hits hard, is the cost of living.
Yeah, rent is the big one, often feels astronomical in major cities. But it's more than just housing, isn't it?
True. The source also points to things like traffic, just the daily grind of congestion,
Mm.
and pollution, environmental concerns. Those definitely take a toll.
It really forces you to think about the trade-offs, because the very density that creates all those opportunities, well, it also seems to create stress.
How so?
Your source mentions the relentless pace of life, the constant noise, and interestingly, it suggests there might be less deep community bonding than you'd expect compared to maybe a smaller place.
That community point is really interesting, especially when you pair it with another challenge the source brings up,
Hmm.
loneliness.
Right. It feels like such a paradox, doesn't it? You're literally surrounded by millions of people,
Hmm?
yet the material notes that feeling isolated is actually quite a common thing for city dwellers.
Yeah, it suggests that just being physically near people doesn't automatically mean you have, like, real connection or a strong support network.
Exactly. Proximity isn't community.
Okay, so that gives us a picture of the city, lots of draws, but some significant hurdles, too. Let's completely switch gears now and look at village life.
Right. The other side of the coin.
And your source material often paints well, maybe a more romantic picture here, doesn't it? Fresh air, open fields, knowing your neighbors.
It does lean into that sometimes, but there's definitely a basis for it in the advantages it lists. Peace and mental well-being come up a lot.
How's that connected?
Directly linked in the source to less noise, for starters. A slower pace of life, which can lower stress. And simply being physically closer to nature. That seems key.
And community. That thing cities can sometimes lack.
Yeah, the village often seems to excel there, according to the source. It talks about that everyone knows everyone kind of feeling. Stronger, maybe more automatic support systems. A sense of belonging.
Okay, and what about practicalities, like cost?
And that's another big difference highlighted. Cheaper housing is usually the main thing. But also, maybe the potential to grow some of your own food, rely more on local produce. It can add up to being more affordable.
And lifestyle.
The source suggests it could be a potentially healthier lifestyle, too. Maybe more access to organic food, more natural opportunities to just be physically active outdoors.
It sounds pretty appealing, laid out like that. Almost idyllic.
It can be, but your source material is also quite realistic. It doesn't shy away from the drawbacks of village life either.
Right, the reality check. What are the main ones?
Well, the flip side of that peace and quiet can be limited opportunities. That's a big one.
Fewer jobs, you mean?
Exactly. Typically, fewer jobs available, wages might be lower, and accessing things like specialized healthcare. That can be much harder than in a city. Much further to travel, maybe.
And the slower pace. Good for some.
But for others, the source notes, it can just lead to boredom. There's simply less organized entertainment, fewer modern amenities compared to what a city offers.
Makes sense. What else? Any specific issues?
Infrastructure often comes up. Things like unreliable public transport, and a really big one these days, poor internet access. That can be a major hurdle for work, for connection, for everything, really.
Yeah, that's huge now. Okay, this is where, for me, it gets really powerful. Because your source doesn't just give us these lists of pros and cons. It brings in actual people's stories.
Right, lived experiences. They really cut through the generalizations.
So tell us about those. There was one about someone moving from this city.
Yeah, the source shares this perspective of someone who left a corporate city job, went back to their hometown village, and they reported just feeling happier, healthier. And there was this specific detail that really stood out, seeing kids playing outside again, instead of just being glued to screens. It makes that lifestyle shift feel very real, very concrete.
Wow, yeah. That paints a picture. Trading that high-stress career for well-being, family time,
Yeah.
different priorities.
Exactly. But then contrast that with the other story in the source, someone who went the opposite way, moved from a village to the city.
And their reason.
Primarily, the lack of opportunities back home. Simple as that. And in the city, they found a better job, met more people, expanded their social life.
Yeah.
And they actually used the word growing, feeling like they were personally developing, broadening their horizons in the city environment.
These two stories, side by side, they really hammer home the main point your source seems to be making, don't they?
Absolutely. That there's no single better way to live. It's just so incredibly subjective.
It totally depends on, well, you. Your individual needs, what you value most at a particular time, maybe even what stage of life you're in.
Right. It forces you to ask yourself, what am I really looking for right now? Is it career acceleration and nonstop experiences? Or is it more about stability, community, maybe that connection with nature?
So if the choice is so personal now, what about looking ahead? Your source raises this really interesting question near the end. What if you didn't actually have to choose between these two extremes?
Yeah, this part explores some ideas that could potentially blend the best elements of both worlds. It's quite forward-looking.
Like what concepts does it mention?
Well, one is the whole digital nomad idea, people working remotely, theoretically from anywhere with a decent internet connection. Could be a beach in Bali, could be the Alps, completely separating your job from a fixed city location.
Okay, that's one possibility. What else?
Then there's the concept of smart villages. Based on the source description, this seems to be about bringing better tech, especially high-speed internet, and improved infrastructure to rural areas.
So trying to tackle those traditional village drawbacks.
Kind of, yeah. Trying to reduce the disadvantages without losing the core appeal, perhaps.
Interesting. And the third idea?
Eco-cities, which the source describes as urban areas, but designed very differently, specifically designed to integrate nature into the city itself.
How would that help?
Well, potentially offering a different kind of balance within an urban setting, maybe mitigating some of that stress and pollution we talked about earlier, the downsides of traditional cities.
So the source presents these as ways we might find, like a perfect balance someday.
It poses the question, definitely. It's really asking, can technology and smarter design bridge this gap? Can we keep the good bits of both city and village life and somehow minimize the bad bits?
Right. Okay, so to sort of wrap up this deep dive, the main message, the core takeaway from your source material seems crystal clear, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so. Unequivocally, there's no single right answer. City versus village. It just fundamentally depends on what fits you as an individual.
Some people really do thrive on that city energy, the opportunities.
Yeah,
They find it stimulating.
absolutely. While others find their deep sense of peace, their well-being, that feeling of belonging, much more strongly in a village setting, close to nature, close community.
It really is a deeply personal calculation.
Yeah.
And thinking about those future ideas the source touched on, smart villages, eco-cities, it does lead to a final, quite thought-provoking question for you, the listener, to consider. It's kind of implicit in the source material.
As we potentially move towards blending these lifestyles more, using tech to connect villages, designing cities with more nature, does getting the best of both worlds actually create a truly ideal life?
Or Is there maybe a risk that in trying to blend them, we end up losing the unique, distinct essence of what makes each lifestyle valuable in its own right? Something to think about.